Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we are discussing the Acolyte episode one. Um, so I did make a couple notes. I just got done watching it myself. I was a little too tired after work last night to do this, so I figured, well, let's get this done today. So one of the things that I'm looking at it as just purely, it's a standalone whatever. Okay, kind of like the Star Trek stuff where it's its own universe, it has its own whatever, and I'll say in a lot of the Disney stuff, it is its own universe. It is not what I would call my own canon. I like what George Lucas had done. I even like the prequels. I know a lot of people didn't care for them. And from there, I go into the written expanded universe. I believe that was guided a lot from George. Kind of helped out with West End Games. The writers had their own ideas. I think it worked pretty well. That is its own universe. Everything that Disney has done is Disney Wars, really. And that's where I would really kind of classify this. This is all Disney Wars. Now, what gets kept out of Disney Wars and what gets left in Star Wars is its own thing. Um, so some of the things that when we first open up, we get to see. It is interesting that they were reusing some of the set pieces that they used in Jakku from the Force Awakens. I thought that was kind of funny to see that repainted and reused. Um, it does have a kind of otherworldly feel to it. That they did have quite a few aliens in the bar or cantina, whatever you want to call it. Um, and then we have Carrie Ann Moss, and she's sitting around having a couple drinks or whatever. I hate to say it in a lot of regards, and it's probably because we have someone that doesn't know really how to direct or anything. Um, the acting is very stiff, and it really goes on the director. People should be a little loosened up a little bit more. Everyone's so rigid and stiff, like they're almost like they're walking on pins. That's something I kind of noticed out of this myself. George Lucas, I mean, he had them retake things over and over, and they were kind of teasing them back and forth. There's a levity in the whole atmosphere. They were having fun. They were doing the serious parts, but um, I think he had people feeling comfortable with what they were doing. I think with Leslie Headland, because she's never really directed much of anything. She's just kind of everyone's stiff. Everyone's trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. Um, so then we get the first fight, and the thing that amazes me there is Carrie Ann Moss dies of a knife to roughly the heart area. Actually, I'm looking at it, and it's a little bit up. It's above and off to the left of where the heart is. So really, they hit in a good position. Didn't really, she wouldn't have died. They had the positioning wrong. So it's funny because I know this has been brought up in some of the other stuff um, in the Ahsoka series. Here we have um, Sabine. Uh, she gets stabbed by a lightsaber, and whatever the character's name, nobody's ever going to remember. The Dark Inquisitor's sister or whatever stabs her and kind of leans over and says a couple lines to her, and then she pulls the lightsaber out, and you know she lives. You can be stabbed by a lightsaber in the Disney Wars universe, and you don't die. But apparently, a knife can kill you. So I'm thinking they're basing this off of West End Games, where a manhole cover is more dangerous than a lightsaber. So, which is why we didn't really play much in the West End Games because, at the same time West End Games came out with, or not West End Games, I'm sorry, Hasbro with Wizards of the Coast when they had the D20 license. A manhole cover out of the D20 Modern, which is all the same mechanics, was more deadly than a lightsaber. And we, out of the group of us, is like, what's the point of being a Jedi? So we just had a hard time in that. Um, so, we have Kyrian Moss die of a non-lethal knife wound, and she did it saving somebody else from another knife. I'm sure everybody's watched this, or you've seen plenty of other things. I think that's kind of cheap. That's really cheap to a Jedi, um, and it's even cheaper because I know that in one of the last series in the expanded universe when they have an entire world populated by Sith. They're using knives, but they have a special type of knife that's actually out of glass, and they'll stab you and they'll kind of break it off. So it's razor sharp, and it just continues to keep cutting after it's broken off. And even there, um, you still have to kind of watch where you're cutting. It's got to go through bone or whatever else. So they had certain techniques, and some of the better blades cost quite a few credits for them. So then she gets arrested and she's hauled off or whatever, and we have a completely droid piloted ship or crewed ship, and which seems a little odd. I think that you would have had at least one or two security guards. Um, my understanding had always been when George Lucas was doing this, yes, we have the Jedi and all that, but there's a whole support group there. You might have a ship that can be run completely by droids, but you're still going to have a couple security personnel there that know how to do everything else, even though that it's primarily taken care of by the droids. So I think that's really cheap there. Yeah, it's poor writing in a lot of regards, and she has no idea about hyperdrive lanes. Um, I don't think she's ever even watched an episode, a movie, or anything science fiction to begin with, let alone Star Wars. Um, I mean, what we call Episode 4, which is the original Star Wars. I mean, Han is chiding Luke to say, hey, flying through hyperspace is not as easy as you think. If you miscalculate, you're going to fly through an asteroid field, which will destroy the ship, or straight into a star going supernova. Um, so there are routes that get planned. So when you're figuring this out, it's one thing if you're saying, hey, it's just a direct line from here to there. But when you have to say, okay, you know, the reality of how the hyperdrive works is you're going from this system to that system through a set route, and then it has to go to another route to another one. So when you're programming it, you're actually jumping in and out of how this is plotted around to avoid asteroid belts, stars, planetary bodies, whatever else. And it's got to make course corrections. And that's why it takes time. So nobody's thought about these things in many years. In the Solo or Rogue One, how fast you can take off and suddenly be at another start, another planet or whatever. uh, they've kind of lost that whole concept of there is a time frame that it takes to get somewhere. Everyone thinks that nowadays hyperspace is instantaneous. You are suddenly there. That's why when I'm covering the stuff in the Star Wars in the West End game Star Wars, we have so many years or months or days worth of consumables. If you're flying inside of a starship, you can make it for a day, and you're going to have to stop and refuel and get food. And especially if you're in a starfighter, the pilot's probably going to want to really go and hit the the boys room, the girls room, the whatever, the little aliens room, the whatever the being is. So if you want to say it, the little beings room, um, of some sort, because they're going to be kind of sitting there saying, hey, they had the Imperial Taco Bell or something like that, and they've got to go blow up a toilet somewhere. Trying to make this funny, but it's just the reality of sometimes they're stuck in a fighter for a day, but boy, they got to get out and stretch their legs. Maybe they have to go get some actual water instead of whatever their paste stuff is. Depending on what their fighter is, do they actually have a an atmospheric condition inside the fighter, or are they an enclosed spacesuit like the TIE pilots are? How is that all working out? So, um, your hyperspace lanes do not go through asteroid fields. Those are some of the things that we have to make sure that we keep up, and they will make sure that they get plotted around them, or you will have to have a set of ships that are there. Now, one of the things that Gene Roddenberry had come up with, and George Lucas had borrowed from Star Trek, was when you have a shield system, that shield system also has um, shoot, now my mind goes blank on it. A deflector shield, or okay. So what the deflector does is it actually pushes away that space debris, asteroids or other thing. Now, once the asteroids get to be too big, it's not actively going to push it unless it is. Um, we'll say like a certain, depending on the size of deflector dish and how much power it can output. But George Lucas had kind of mentioned that first die out of like a 2D or whatever is kind of your deflector. So if you only have a 1D in your shields, it's probably only a +1. So it's just moving the little space debris. So you aren't getting these tiny little pebbles and stones thrown at your hull all day long. So you have to realize that there is a give and take here. Um, And George Lucas had kind of worked off of what Gene Roddenberry had done. Gene Roddenberry had worked off of what George Lucas had done. So really, when we look at a lot of our science fiction, a lot of the stuff that's been written and done is based off of George and Gene and their works, and we've pulled it into whatever other genre that they create afterwards. Um, so that's kind of whatever. I did think it's funny because we do have the one gentleman and he's sitting there shirtless, and okay, so we have a little bit of, it's not nudity, but I thought everybody said that Headland there was she's got a wife, and I think it's funny that they got the guy without a shirt or whatever. I don't understand the real need for that, but you know, as an adult, it doesn't mean anything to me. I just think it's one of those. Well, wait a minute, but the actor there, he is extremely stiff. I don't know if he's ever acted before. I don't know where they drug him up from, but boy, he is one of the stiffest actors I've seen. And there again, that's got to be from her direction because whatever the director is asking them to do, if they're asking people to loosen up or work, you know, it's really stiff acting. It really is. Um, and to sit here and say that our main character, our actress here, and I can't even think of her name, um, for her to have been a Padawan and then have had walked away on her own, and it sounds like she had been a fairly proficient Padawan. She seems like she has absolutely no powers. So for anyone to sit here and look at her to test her now, I don't think she's a Jedi anymore. I don't think there's any possibility. She's lost all of her abilities. And of course, I'm probably going to get frustrated later on because she's probably going to kind of what they had done with Rey. Suddenly, she's going to be the most powerful Jedi ever. Um, I really hope not. I will say that maybe it's one of those things. She hasn't really used it all that much, but you would there's still going to be that ability. You're going to have some ability here. She couldn't even slide her little. I'll say it is kind of cute. It's like a tricorder, except it's a little droid. Really, that's what it seems to me. But I don't know what this thing all. It's their MacGuffin droid or whatever. She rips the head off, uses it to do some welding or something, and pops the head back on. But there's sparks coming off when she's ripping the head off. So I don't get it. They're just coming up with stuff out of the seat of their pants, and I think it's kind of coming out of their pants too. Um, the droid itself, the concept is kind of cute. I do like the concept, but there again, when you have somebody that doesn't understand how to write stuff, direct stuff, or anything else, I've never. I think I heard that she had done 3 movies, but I never heard of the movies. I don't know of anyone else that's heard of them or anything else. I mean, the only thing that anybody knows her from is being Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant to whatever that was doing. I don't think she's got any ability from what I see so far. Um, I don't. It's okay, but this is the show really belongs where it is. It's on Disney Plus as a TV show for, you know, if you just take it as this is a standalone in its own universe, fine. Um, to see Carrie Ann Moss trying to be a Jedi, kind of doing her own stance. I know people are complaining about the Jedi foo. Maybe if you want to say it in this regard, maybe in their timeline, in their own personal timeline, the Jedi foo was a big thing back then, but then they get away from it, and then they get more to another traditional fighting form. And I know people talk about the different forms that different Jedi's use. Maybe this was just the latest, greatest craze that they had at the time. I don't know. It is a huge universe. We're talking about. Um, I have to admit, I was getting a snack when the writing was up there, so it was like 100. I'm hoping they're not seeing 100 years before, um, episode 1, because that fits absolutely nothing. That's really kind of a messed up thing because I think they were talking about they had not really seen the Jedi in 1,000 years. So um, I admit I just briefly caught it, but I didn't catch a good reading of that little script in the front. I was grabbing a little snack because I just started it and thought I had an extra couple seconds there, but I didn't. So timeline wise for the real universe, what George Lucas had done, I don't think this fits because we've already seen some other things. For Disney Wars, it's whatever. Um, I think it fits for Disney Wars. Star Wars, no. Disney Wars, sure. Um, I'm just doing the first episode. I'll try to get the second episode done tomorrow. We'll try and have this for tomorrow. Um, you know, I don't know. It's just one of those things. This is my feelings. It's not like I'm talking to anybody else on this stuff. I'm just kind of jotting down a couple notes here on my phone as I'm watching the show, and it just the some of the things that they're doing, I can kind of see, but the other parts of it, no. I can see droids flying the ship, but it's funny how they have the droids suddenly become the chairs. Um, So to me, it seems like you have a backup droid piloting a ship that was meant for people. And in a time of the Jedi's being at their highest, um, it really doesn't fit. You would have to have a human crew on there because when when we see in episode 1, we have a human crew flying the Jedi around. Now you're going to have a human crew there just to make sure that the droids are getting things done correctly. As overseers, if for nothing else, they're going to be security guards, and you're definitely going to have a regular pilot. And I would see a single pilot being there along with the droids. And I don't know what the guy did because that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now seems like he had somebody else that knows how to do the Force and manipulate the droids, which is something that Wizards of the Coast had done. So that was there in their RPG data bank. So I don't know if they're grabbing all this stuff from the old uh, Wizards of the Coast. They're definitely not grabbing it from West End Games. Of course, I don't know if any of them can read. I don't know anymore. Um, I'm throwing some shade out their way. It just seems like everything was. It's from episode 1. It seems like it's a good start, but it like I said, very stiff. Everyone's stiff. Um, we had the ship crash because nobody understands how hyperdrive systems work, doing hyperdrive or hyperspace lanes. Um, you know, so we have things kind of going off, and you have to have the plot twist there. Um, I could see if they pulled it out of hyperdrive and there was a malfunction and it crash landed them onto a planet. That's one thing, but honestly, for the characters that were imprisoned there, if they already had that ability, how come they didn't already escape? That makes no sense. Most people, if they had that ability, they would have been gone already. So I don't know. It is what it is. We'll see what the second episode brings us tomorrow, and I'll kind of do a review on that. Uh, hopefully you like this. We're going to go through this one episode at a time, and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.